twins has become like the next booming word. A lot of booming words have come up in the last few years in this domain of AI, machine learning, and all these innovative technologies. Digital twins has come up in the last few years, and the dream is pretty big. But here we are not exactly here to discuss about digital twins as per se, but the because we are in a platform where we have to contribute to the social good by figuring out how we can use the NLP tools that is with us. We are talking about the necessary knowledge representation that must be already in place to ensure that these digital twins are actually beneficial for the society. What happens is the innovations that come in the healthcare industry, which is coming these days, is very isolated in nature, and an aggregation of those innovation is necessary. It is basically for that. Also, let me start with a short anecdote that uh, it is there is a fair history that human beings have been intelligent for almost about 100,000 years now, and it took them almost 90,000 years to start farming. Then, in a span of 5,000 to 6,000 years, they were able to build civilizations and start with basic medical procedures. Back in Egyptian civilization, or if you're talking about our own, like in India, the Ayurveda, the Chinese medicine, all of that started around, say, 3,000, 4,000 BC. As we move forward, in the Renaissance period, we know lots of anatomical studies have been done. People have actually cut the human body to see what's inside, how things work. And slowly, as we progressed, 19th century, antibiotics came in the market, vaccination came in the market. In the 20th century, we saw a lot of electronic devices coming in. The discovery of X-ray, we are able to see through the human body, computational tomography, things like that. And the part about diagnosis really boomed in the 20th century. But 21st century is well and leap bound. If we just focus on this timeline, initially the development period was 90,000 years. Then it took only 5,000 years to reach the next level, that is civilization. A few hundred years to reach the next level, a 50 or 70 years to reach the next level. And between the late 20th century and the early 21st century, just in a matter of 10 to 15 years, the entire geography of the healthcare industry has changed. And in this progress, it is not very far-fetched to assume that what will come in the next 5 years will be already beyond our grasp if we do not upgrade ourselves quickly enough. And for that, we need to take steps from now. So with that thought in mind, let us progress. So this actually says the same thing about what I just discussed. So if you see that 5,000 BC, herbal remedies, Ayurveda, things like that, Renaissance period, anatomical studies, empirical methods. Then came the germ theory in 19th century, anesthesia, basic surgeries. 100 more years, we are already into vaccines, antibiotics, advanced surgery, ECG, radiology, even robot-assisted surgeries. A few more years, we are into wireless instruments, IoT, remote procedures, and precision medicines. Our entire genomic sequence have already been mapped. Now, what is a digital twin? The words digital and twin, it's pretty obvious. Digital means something which is numeric in nature, and twin is basically a copy. So we can say it's an accurate electronic representation or model of something that has physical existence. And it is created using obviously the data that is available with us in the physical world, and also some simulations that mimic the behavior of these physical objects and processes that we want to model. Now, why should we do this? The thing is, sometimes it's better to work with the simulation than with the real object when it comes to healthcare, right? So applications of digital twins are not only in healthcare but also in things like transportation, manufacturing, urban planning, automobile, e-commerce, environmental monitoring, defense, and so on. One very easy example to understand that has already been in the market for a long time is something like architecture plans. If you think that how the architects they build the 3D model of the house before to calculate all the material cost, to calculate how much paint is needed, what is the amount of stress that there might be in the system, and things like that. So this has already been going on for so long. The thing about healthcare is we want to do the same thing for the human body. Now, when you are talking in terms of healthcare, there are several ways to classify it. First is the scope. So, digital twins can be related to a specific person. That means the parameters that are going with the person, for example, say his height, his weight, his blood pressure, his blood sugar level, his heart conditions, liver conditions. So all these parameters, if we model them to create a digital replica of that human being, so that we can come up with treatment plans, we can say it's a personalized digital twin. Now, digital twins can also be scaled up to organizational levels as well, and also to the population levels. We'll be discussing on each of these terms as we move on. But let me just skip through this a little bit faster so that we have more time there. So yeah, this was in terms of scope. In terms of target is basically what we want to model. We can model something like say gene sequences. We can create a genetic profile of someone. We can create the profile of diseases to study how these diseases spread, what are the contamination protocols, what are the mobility protocols, how can they be stopped, what is its interaction with various kind of drugs. Similarly, various biological processes can also be mimicked, and also say how a healthcare facility is performing, what is the how is the management going on, what are the amount of nurses that are needed, what is the amount of beds that are needed. All this kind of tracking can also be done through a digital twin of the entire healthcare facility as well. And the purpose of this is obviously training, that means educating professionals, simulation. So before we say do a surgery, if we can do the simulation of a surgery to find out potential problems, that is very good. Doing statistical surveys, demographic, the digital twin in the demographic scale can help us to draw conclusions from the variance within the population itself. Predictive analytics, we can predict the movement of say diseases throughout. So it was very apparent during the COVID-19 period how this helped, how the modeling of the disease helped us to predict hotspots in our societies. Drug designs very relevant in the current market. The fast development of the COVID-19 vaccine was crucial for the survival of a large volume of population. And of course personalized medicine, that means medicine which is curated to the biological your biological properties of your body. It's not just a simple tablet that is given to everyone, it is specifically tuned to your physiology. And here is a little bit more depth about the scope. So patient level, it's patient-centric health profiles, genomic digital twins. We can model different kind of internal organs. So if there is say something like a fatty liver, we can actually do some of the scans required for detecting the fatty livers, and then convert those scans to an appropriate 3D model that will allow us to interact with it to find out proper procedures of maybe doing a surgery or making an incision and things like that. Also, we can maintain the medical history throughout a long period of time. So over the years, all the medical like events that has gone that the patient has gone through, that can be in record and it can come up when necessary. We can create psychometric profiles for the patients. In organizational levels, these biological models can be used for training and simulations. We can do digital twins of medical procedures, biological processes, drug designs, precision medicine, genomic medicine. So all of these we have more or less discussed already. Protein-protein interaction is one more a very important aspect of digital twin. Basically, here we are creating a digital twin of a protein molecule and trying to figure out how that protein molecule is folded, because these protein are long chains of atoms, and the way they are folded inside the space is actually relevant to how a drug will interact with that protein, or how an enzyme will interact with the protein. So the modeling the protein structure is a very astute application of digital twins as well. Advanced imaging devices like MRI, CT scans are basically creating some copy of the entire thing that is within your body, but this can be again modified with using tools like say generative AI, and further scaled up for a much more finer observation. Another is remote patient management. The hospital can be somewhere and the patient can be somewhere else. We know that we cannot take the hospital everywhere, but it is much easier to take an internet connection. In the demography level, we can of course do disease modeling, and we can track infectious diseases. We can track the global health monitoring to figure out if there is any major problem in say the nutritional values of a region. Maybe it is the amount, the kind of crops that is growing in the region is not nutritious enough, and that can come up from these demography level modelings. Targets. Uh, targets. Okay, so this genomic and proteomics targets is basically we sequence the gene and create the genomic profiles, and as we have discussed, the protein structures, disease modeling, biological systems, operation management. So all of these are basically highlights of the different kind of application areas where we can use these digital twins. Some parts where I want to draw your focus is the operations and management part. Here, optimization of healthcare resources is very key for certain regions or certain parts of our globe where the healthcare services are limited, and carrying out vaccination drives to locate where more vaccinations are required as compared to other places. Health policy simulation, if a new health policy is launched, what kind of effect it can have on a demography, that can be modeled. Insurance parameter optimization, the insurance companies can think about better ways to provide insurance coverage, what is the correct ways to maintain their own profits, but also to give maximum amount of service to the people. And in terms of purpose as well, again, we have already discussed more of this. So I would really like to take the focus to knowledge representation. So now let's come to the challenges. What are the challenges? First and foremost challenge is the heterogeneous data sets. That means data is coming from a variety of fields. You can have a handwritten prescription from a doctor, or you can have some excerpt from a specific book, or it can be some say experimental study which is written in a research paper, or some video from a robotic surgery. So all of these data, though they actually adhere to the concept of healthcare, but they are very, very different types of data source and require very different kinds of processing. So really bringing them all together in the same data structure is a very big challenge. Again, the innovation that is happening in today's market is isolated. That means they are not connected to a global schema, you can say. Regulatory challenges, because the current regulations that are in place is you can say it is somehow backdated, and it is not keeping up with the fast pace in which technology is progressing. It was seen during the COVID-19 vaccine rollout. Many clinical policies were overlooked to make a fast rollout, and that happened because of this emergency situation. But these kind of things will keep on coming, and we have to find out better regulatory conditions, or regulatory bodies have to take much more clearer decisions. Integration of all these isolated ideas is also very important. And variance in the healthcare policies, even within a country, from one state to another, the healthcare policy varies by a great amount. Even in say in a country like India, we have seen that people often prefer the medical facilities that is provided in one area of the nation as compared to the other area of the nation. And these kind of things means that the standardization is not in place, and it is very necessary to launch these kind of digital facilities such as digital twins. Again, differential healthcare services, the same thing. data privacy and security. So whenever we are gathering a lot of data from a lot of huge amount of population, there is obviously a chance of leaks, and these leaks can result in huge, like can raise huge concerns. One, for example, one thing can be if a large amount of genomic data is released in the market for some reason or leaked for some reason, it would be very easy for opposing country to create a very small biological weapon to harm maximum amount of population. So things like this always come into the play when we are trying to work with data. Accuracy and reliability. So this digital twin, there is no guarantee that if a surgical simulation works on a digital twin, it will also succeed in the actual patient. So the accuracy and reliability is a question, and that exactly translates to how much user is accepting this digital twin. There are always issues of computational complexity because rendering these digital twins or carrying out these complex operations using this neural networks, these require very costly hardware, and it is not always feasible for everyone to bear that kind of costs. There are lots of stakeholders are in this game. The obvious ones are the patients, the hospitals, the doctors, the nurses. They, other than that, those who are developing the technology, like people like us, the people who are manufacturing the devices, the ethics committees, the cybersecurity service providers, even government who is providing the financial support or the infrastructure support, the legal groups, they also have a lot of headache when it comes to this kind of say policy making. So let us discuss now about the technological stack. So this is not exactly an existing system, you can say, but it's more of an ideal system of what we want to have. And we have, of course, our physical worlds where we already have the healthcare facilities, the patients, the physicians, and the equipments. Above that, the digital twin, the technological stack for digital twins should contain some clear layers. The first one being the data layer, which will organize what kind of data must be extracted from the real world. So it can be sensor data, it can be clinical reports, it can be genomic data, and so on. The second thing is communication, because this data needs to be communicated not only through the system but also to say other say healthcare facilities or to another country for some kind of surveys, or maybe to someone who is doing a demographic study. So communication becomes a key point. Of course, the advancement in 5G and 6G communication is a very big boon, and of course internet of things is absolutely necessary to connect all these different types of equipments and facilities. When you are trying to store them, of course storage servers are needed, and herein comes the concept of the data structure. That means we need a common data structure which can fit this this variety of digital twins that are coming in the market. So if one person develops or one organization develops a digital twin for a heart, another organization develops a digital twin for a liver, and we want to store the same, both of the same things in the same storage location, there needs to be some parity between the formats in which they are generated. So we have to figure out those common data structures as well. In the representation layer, the numeric representation comes into the market, and what kind of modeling we are using, and the schema. The schema is very important. We'll have a bit of discussion about the schema which is necessary for representing the knowledge as well. And after that representation comes the computation part, where we are doing that analysis or that prediction. We need costly processing units, we need high-end machines, or we need cloud-based deployments. We need AI, machine learning, deep learning, and other than that, some are also not mentioned. We need technologies like, say, big data. We might need blockchain for, say, distributed, the distributed, say, your uh, more a distributed deployment, you can say. And finally, when it comes to the application, how the visualization will look, how the simulation can take place, or what analysis we can gather from there, those things come in. Cybersecurity protocols must be in place to protect the data and to prevent any kind of breach or any kind of corruption. Specifically in the communication layer, the storage layer, and the computation layer, these are very essential. And also, this entire stack must communicate with the already existing knowledge that is in our real world. For example, things like the electronic health records, the protein data banks, the medical literature, demographic information, the pharmaceutical repositories, and the disease repositories. And this communication must be guided by the ethics and regulatory bodies. That means how you can use this information and build this application, that must be strictly regulated. So let's take a very hypothetical case study to see how and where these problems come up. Can I just ask a question? How much time I have left so that I can uh, adjust my talk? Hello?
Yes, you have 15 to 20 minutes.
15 minutes left. Okay, so I'll take a little bit slow then. So let us take this use case. So let's say a patient has come up for a consultation in a clinic, and of course the patient comes with some of his own biological parameters. So that can be, say, your genomic profiles, your medical history, your biological profile, what kind of habits you are into or what restrictions you have. And based on the consultation, we get a statement from the patient about what the problem is. From that statement we can have some automated systems which can extract what are the symptoms. We can identify what domain the problem belongs to and assign a appropriate doctor to the patient. All the parameters related to the patient can be transferred to the doctor for his reviewing, and based on that we can then move on to the testing phase. That means the doctor can recommend some tests, and so this is the purple section. And based on the text, some kind of, say, radiological images or some reports are generated, some diagnosis is done, and the doctors receive that diagnostic report. And based on that report, he can either give some medication or provide some treatments. Now, if some medication is provided, a pharmacy comes into the play where the pharmacy will sell that medicine to the patient. Or if a treatment is necessary, the medical facility comes into the play. And of course, the medical facility would be in consultation with the doctor, and maybe after the recovery, it will also provide some kind of monitoring for the patient. The patient can, after some monitoring, if the problem is resolved, then fine. If it is not resolved or if any follow-up is required, he can again go back into the cycle. Now, this seems to be a very basic a flow of the current society, like how a clinic works in the present society. But if we want to make a digital twin of this, say, process, a lot of different things come into the play. If we just take even the first step, when the patient comes with the initial statement, so that statement is in the form of a text or an audio, for example. From there, if we extract the symptoms, that must be in a specific structure, right? Based on those symptoms, there must be a mapping table that can map an existing set of symptoms to some specific domains. And when we have a specific, say, set of domains in which the patient might belong to, we have to find the suitable doctors. So that repository must be present. Once the doctor comes in, he can have access to all the medical history, the biological profile, the habits, restrictions. So let's say the patient has, let us assume, which is very unlikely, but let us assume that a patient has a very clean record of all his medical history, his entire biological profile, all the habits. He's very honest about his habits and what are these restrictions. The genomic profile, every patient, of course, have not done the genomic profiling, but if, say, the patient has already done it, so that information is also available. Now, just in this part of the process, if you can see, we have already dealt with so many different types of, so many different format of data. Now, if we want to create a digital twin of this process, of this system, there has to be a common data structure in the background, which during each of these transactions, during each of these events, that knowledge base must be updated in some way. And it must be tied to the patient in some way, right? Otherwise, it is impossible to track down, because, say, if some treatment is done now on the patient and the medical history is not updated, it is not right to assume that the medical history would be complete. So a closed loop innovation is necessary here, and that is the very reason that isolated innovation does not bear very good fruits when it comes to healthcare technologies, and that is the reason that healthcare technology, in comparison to other domains, healthcare technologies is still facing so much hurdles because these isolated innovations are not able to meet the required amount of, say, the FD approval, something like that. The clearances, it cannot get the clearances because of this. So if we move on to the next phases, if we see about the test recommendations, once the doctor has recommended some tests and the diagnosis is done, so many different kind of automation can take place in this region, right? So say an X-ray is done to find out whether the patient has a fracture or not. Now, there can be an innovation about detecting automatic fractures from X-ray images, or say a an MRI scan is done and we need to figure out whether there is a tumor in the brain or not. So the brain tumor segmentation algorithms come into the play. So for each and every minute problems, there are so many different types of algorithms, and the binding all of these various processes is a very big challenge, and it differs from institution to institution. Of course, one medical facility may prefer one AI enabled process as compared to the other facilities, and of course it depends on different kind of the regions as well. Similarly, when we go to the pharmacy, say if a medication is prescribed, now if you see that there is a purple arrow between medication and genomic profiling, the thing is this arrow represents the concept of precision medicine. That means if my medication is at par with the genomic profile, that means if it agrees with the genomic profile, then we can say that this medicine has a higher efficacy rate. That means it has a higher chance of working for the patient. Now, this one line, it represents so vast field of research, right? Because uh, just getting the genomic profile from the patient, mapping the alleles and the genes with the proper medications or proper drug interactions, this is very complex, and trying to get it all down into the same data structure is not at all a matter of joke in this case. Similarly, when the medicine is prescribed and we go to the pharmacy, of course, the pharmaceutical, the molecular composition of of that thing comes into the play. The different manufacturers come into the play. Whether it is available in the market or not comes into the play. So many different variables is embedded even within a simple thing like a clinic where a patient just goes, tells the doctor what has happened, and the doctor prescribes some medicine. Right. So with that in mind, we just move on. So what is the necessity of this common data structure? What we actually want to establish here is the basically the variety in which we are gathering the data. So we already have the external data, right? So the EHR, that is the electronic healthcare record, the data banks, the literature, the pharmaceutical data, public data sets that people are working on. So this is already there. Other than that, medical facilities are generating clinical reports and hospital records every moment. Lots of insurance record is being generated, and equipments are always pinging out new images, new ultrasound images, new ECG reports. So these data is being generated, and each of them have different modalities. Patients have their own personal healthcare information. They have smartwatches in their hand which tracks their BP all the time. But the sad thing is that when we go to a doctor, that information that the smartwatch has captured for say a year or 2 years or 3 years, but that information is not at all usable to the doctor, yeah, because this system is not standardized. So standardization is a very important thing that comes into play. And so the patient history, the patient transcriptions, hereditary information, genomic profile. So each and every data point must be unified. And unless and until this is unified, it is very difficult to come up to really launch digital twin in the healthcare industry and really make it work. That means actually have that end of the line delivery from in the consumer level. That is very difficult. There can always be new innovations, there can be flashy publications, there can be a lot of marketing, but if it actually does not serve the population, there is not much benefit in there. So the proposal of this short study is basically a holistic healthcare framework to embed the digital twins, and the motto is one species, one schema. That means the entire world, the healthcare facility of the entire world must be concentrated into one single schema, something like a single entity attribute relation model that everybody can, access and update and keep in touch with. That can really help in progressing the healthcare conditions for not specific humans but human beings as a species. And this entity attribute relation model, obviously there can be present the various elements of the healthcare industry along with the relevant parameters and their contexts. Now, this is one of the highlights of my own PhD topic as well, that is content, context, and concept. Whenever we try to understand things, whenever we try to represent things, these three things are very, very necessary. So, if we are talking about this unified schema and we want to update this schema, if we want to update this knowledge base, so we can, you know, uh, operate in these three different levels. So content update basically are nuclear updates where we just maybe change one single attribute in the schema or in the knowledge base. Contextual update is when changing one specific attribute in the database, it affects the neighboring nodes as well. For example, say a test report result has come up. So if there is a node corresponding to a test and the report has come up, so that obviously have some effect on the nodes which are related to diagnosis, right? And say conceptual update is basically when entire branches are created or deleted inside that knowledge base due to some specific update or some specific transaction that has happened. And for example, a proposed treatment by a physician opens up a new branch of healthcare facility, right? So if I propose that this specific person needs a kidney transplant, for example, and so the moment this is said or this is registered in the knowledge base and a hospital is associated with the process, the hospital is bound to make some updates regarding the allotment of beds, the allotment of nurses, having the operation theater ready, having the necessary medicines, the doctors, and so an entire new branch is created just because of this update. So this is a very conceptual level update, you can say. And we have also proposed a very funny acronym which is called as muscle properties of the schema. And the main things that we need to take care of is the multimodality, that we are attending to the multimodality of the data that we are acquiring, and the schema takes that into account. Uniformity, that means if we are, say, if two people into different healthcare facility is uploading an X-ray image, for example, that should conform to the standards that is already set by that this holistic healthcare framework. Scalability is very important because with time this schema, it needs to grow and it needs to adopt new kind of technology innovation, new kind of diseases, and new kind of treatment plans and things like that. Consistency is also important. So let me just take you to the slides because I think we need to pace up a little bit. So multimodality, we have already talked, uniformity, scalability, consistency. So consistency is basically if we update the schema in some way, it should not disrupt the already existing schema. So it should be non-disruptive in nature. And clinical processes, they sometimes require a sequence of transactions. So that sequence may be broken in the middle due to lack of some specific data or some corruption in that process. But that entire series of transactions would be broken in that case. So that has to be taken into account. Again, this updates, specifically things like contextual updates, there are dependencies involved. So if one update happens and that leads to another update, so cyclic dependency should be avoided because otherwise it will go into a kind of a loop and it will keep on updating a specific part of that schema. Longevity, of course, this schema must remain relevant for a long, long period of time. That means it needs to adapt, it needs to grow, and it needs to be able to even omit some parts of itself with the changing tides of the healthcare industry. And because it will be a very, very costly affair, if we, for example, if we somehow build this universal schema, and if we have run that for 10 years or 20 years, and then again we have to redesign it from the scratch, so that will be a very, very, very costly affair, and so that must be taken into account as well. And of course, the final thing, that is ethics. So that is the last letter of the word muscle. And ethics is, of course, each transaction in the knowledge base must be traceable to the responsible healthcare personnel or the facility. And of course, it should carry their digital signatures or digital fingerprints. Each knowledge based transaction must be explainable to avoid ethical and legal issues. Explainability is a huge concern in the medical research community, and it is one of the biggest bar for adopting AI-based techniques in the healthcare community. Accountability, people, it needs to be accountable, patients, doctors, facilities, even equipment manufacturers, they need to be accountable for erroneous transactions, and it must be strictly maintained, again, through some kind of digital signature or fingerprints. And ethical constraints must be maintained while considering the different types of government policies, the privacy concerns, and the regulatory restrictions. And if you want to the necessary steps to start designing this holistic healthcare framework to embed digital twins, I think the first step that we desperately need, and I think everyone will agree with this, is the unique biological identifier. Just like we have our social security number or our passport or Aadhaar card or voter identification card or taxpayer identification number, so all of these are very globally accepted identifications, but we still lack a biological identification, a solid biological identification. There are things like retina scans or say fingerprints, but they are not really so much scalable, you can say. So one the very big area of research when it comes to this biological identifier thing is the genetic identifier. That means if our own genetic code becomes the identifier for who I am, and the biggest reason of having your genetic code as identifier is, first of all, it is very, very unique for you. Even your own twin sibling will not have the exact same genetic code. And the second thing is, it is extremely complex, even for like large scale quantum computers to break as well. It is extremely complex, and given the advent of quantum computers, even our institute nowadays have access to quantum computation services, and breaking passwords has become quite easy if we can go for a brute force these days. So this can really, really help in that case. And it must be standardized. This biological identifier must be standardized by the respective government, and it should conform to some global standards, because we have to stop thinking in terms of like national or regional boundaries, because this is not good. The way people are getting connected, the way people are, so this entire conference is a very big example how people of different countries are moving to different places and are communicating and conducting a conference. And similarly, so it's not very far that these boundaries, these national and regional boundaries, will become abstract day by day. And we need to figure out things in the global standards now. And it must be mandatorily associated with all healthcare related procedures. Just making the biological identifier is not enough. We have to associate that with every pharmacy, every medicine that we buy in the pharmacy, every clinic that we visit, every insurance premium that we pay. It should be connected with this biological identification document, right? So that is the first step of initiating this schema. And then, of course, we have to keep on tracking this isolated innovation. And to avoid these inconsistencies, we have to standardize these models for predictive analysis, because everybody is developing their model in their own specific ways, but some standardization must be necessary. And the existing literature that is already there, it still has a huge volume of information, and that must be digitized and integrated with the upcoming schema, whatever we are trying to develop here. And of course, we need to start having global scale regulations and standardizations. Every clinic, hospital, pharmacy, doctors, patients, equipments must be connected to this common healthcare framework if we want to progress for a truly digital framework. So some small examples are remaining. So say this is a schema design that somebody has come up with a testing and diagnosis pattern. So yeah, we have some nodes like patient symptoms test and diagnosis, right? So this is, say this is developed by someone individually, and the goal is to read a report which is available like this, and to update it in the schema, so it can read this report and then correspondingly do the necessary updates in the schema. But the thing is, most of the research stops at some point like this. But the point I'm trying to make is we have to connect this to the global schema. Whatever the little contribution that you have made, it has somehow needs to contribute to this global schema, and that way only it can grow. It has to be mapped. Whatever entries that has been done, it must be mapped with this patient's biological identifier. It should be mapped with the medical practitioners records as well. Some small works which are done in our labs, in which we have somehow implemented digital twins and this knowledge graph. So one of this is disease modeling, where we have tried to create synthetic models for benign and malignant cancer cells, right? Okay, so the way we have done it just by using, so this was done quite a while back, about 3 to 4 years back, but it actually speaks in terms of the digital twin concept. So we started with a simple generative adversarial network. It was very booming those days, and so it was not working. It was not working very well. But then when we actually have done, taken the help of medical experts to find out the exact medical parameters that makes psychological image benign or malignant, and based on that we have generated some segmentation masks before that. So one of the parameters was, for example, in benign cells, the size of the cells is more or less uniform, whereas in malignant cells the size is not so uniform. So if you are just by enabling that kind of conditioning, we have seen so much improvement in the the images that are generated. So the images that are shown here are basically synthetic images. These are not real images at all. And just by incorporating these synthetic images, by modeling the nature of the disease within these cytological images, so we were able to get a good amount of gain. So you can see that even top networks like DenseNet and Inception V3, we are getting 6% to 7% boosts over the standard methods without this kind of synthetic augmentation. This shows this is a very minor contribution in terms of digital twin, because here we are trying to create a twin of the disease itself, or the how the what kind of impact the disease has on the cells. Okay, and this is another work that has been lately done. So this is not exactly in the healthcare field, but we can draw some features from this model. So one thing is, so this is basically for creating a knowledge graph from an image, right? So the way we have gone through is, so knowledge graph, it is composed of some objects, some attributes of the object, some actions, and different kind of relations within them, right? So if we try to compute relations directly by using some kind of neural network, the number of classes becomes huge, because if say you have 1,000 different objects, and even if you take the interaction between possible interactions between two such objects, we will end up with 10 to the power 6 number of unique combination of two different objects. If we add in 1,000 different types of relations that can happen between those objects, that number goes up to 10 to the power 9 different possible combinations. So extracting the relations directly is a very big challenging task. But then again, we thought that caption generation is something that we are already doing, right? And we know that language itself has a sense of relation embedded within them. So if we can generate captions from the images, then obviously we are already extracting the relations from the images. So we can exploit that to find out, we have exploited the dependency relations from the regional captions to create the graphlets, and then later we merged the graphlets. So this shows how multimodal technologies can really help, how combination of like visual textual entailment can really help. So this is a, for example, a simple scene with a bed, a chair, some potted plants. So we have found out some regions of interest from the images, and for every regions of image, we came up with an image caption. Now these are automatically generated by state-of-the-art techniques, and these are pretty good generations. And we have explainable systems that can extract dependency relations from image captions, and then after we have the dependency relations, it's just a piece of cake to extract the entities, the attributes, the relations, the different kinds of, say, actions in the scene. And if we can generate for each and every region, and if we can combine them somehow, if we can find the common nodes in these different kind of graphlets, we can create the rich graph that actually presents the entire image, right? So this same methodology can actually be translated to something like a medical image and say something like a report. If you have a combination of a medical image and a report, we can obviously convert that to some kind of graph-based structure. And if we have that graph-based structure, it will become very easy to map with some existing schema that we need to update or we need to add transactions to, right? And so that is actually the end of the presentation. I hope I have completed fairly in like, I don't know if it's within time or if it is beyond the time. I have lost track of time really. But I hope this was informative for you, and I would welcome some questions now.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ghosh, for a wonderful talk. We'll now take up questions from both in-person or virtual attendees. Do you have a question? Yeah, yeah. We have a question from an in-person. Yeah, you can come.
Thank you, Professor. So I have a question. It's about technique stack.
Technological stack, the slide that you had.
Okay, the tech stack. Okay.
Yeah, because I have a work experience in the information system company, but now I'm data science student. So I'm wondering, in a computational layer, which have AI ML, how do they cooperate with each other department, and how the frequency when they're meeting or discussing their content to each other? Thank you.
Okay, so if I correctly understood your question is what are the different types of AI models that come into the play and how they communicate with each other? Is that
How
correct?
frequently they communicate?
Yeah, with different department.
How frequently they communicate?
Yeah.
It actually depends on the use case. As I told you that the digital twin is not restricted to one specific domain, right? So if you have a machine learning model, for example, to detect pneumonia from chest X-ray images, and then you have a machine learning model for, say, drug design for pneumonia for a specific genetic profile, and of course that there will be some communications within them, but again, that can be heavily regulated at this point. I don't think that in the initial stage there would be much communication between different machine learning models as per se, but of course, as things grow more and more complex and more autonomous, yes, machine learning models will need to communicate. But at this stage, we already have so many isolated models in the market. Just bringing them together in the common data structure itself is a huge task. It will take a few years. At least it will take a few years, given the accelerated growth. But of course, that after that, some point we will have like cascaded models that one output of one model will be the input for the next model, and that will of course come into the play. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question.
Hello, Dr. Ghosh. You meet again. Good evening, sir.
Hello.
The model which you discussed, sir, it's quite relevant for invasive system of medicine. But as you know, in India, we have other systems of medicine as well, which are non-invasive, as in they do not rely on genomic profiling of patients, like homeopathy, for instance, or yoga, for instance. So, with the current ruling dispensation giving an impetus to Indian system of medicine, how do we win the confidence of other systems of medicine? Because if this model gets implemented by any chance, then all those other system of medicine would become redundant.
That's a very good question, actually. That's a very good question. And I should have addressed that issue in this presentation itself. Yes, we do not have a single school of thought when it comes to medicines, right? We have allopathy, we have homeopathy, we have Ayurveda, we have yogic medicines, we have, say, even aromatherapy.
Yeah.
You know, so many different kinds of medicinal practices are there, but it is very challenging to incorporate all of them in the single schema, because the way in which these medical procedures propagate is quite different. Because say if you see the allopathic medicine uh, you know pathway, it is basically have doing some tests, have some diagnosis, prescribe the medicines, follow up, and this iteration goes on. In comparison, if you even compare with something in the same field, that is genomic medicine. Okay, so genomic medicine is the next upcoming thought, the precision medicine. The precision medicine is completely different, because if you have your symptoms, and if you have if you can recognize the source of the symptom, that is some bacteria or some virus that is affecting your body, and you have your genomic profile, that precision medicine, the technologies that come behind that will automatically curate drug design policies for that scenario. So that's an entirely different pathway, right? And as I told, that this schema will need to evolve with time. Just like we can't say that no, homeopathy is already passed. No, it is not passed. Many people actually still benefit from homeopathy, and there are well documented books for this field of medicine as well. There are courses that are going on in various institutes, so it's a very well known field. Ayurveda is something which is accelerating these days. We can say it is being practiced by more and more people. It seems to be a more sustainable field of medicine. So the schema needs to take that into account. If we really hope for a unified schema, it has to have components about the field of medicine that you want to go through. So we can ask the patient which kind of medicine field you want to go to, or which is the best suited for you. We can say that it is very much. It can depend on demographics. It can depend on financial conditions. Obviously, if somebody comes from a very low financial background, we can actually suggest homeopathy to be a much better alternative than allopathy, because you can get much cheaper returns, right? So that has to be integrated for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the, I don't think so. We have any questions from our virtual attendees. So thank you, Dr. Ghosh, for an amazing talk on such a complicated topic. Thank you again for your time and support for this event on such a short notice. You managed to deliver a talk. Thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank
So we now conclude day one of NSG 2024. We will meet again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. BST for a paper presentation, followed by our last keynote talk by Professor Sophia Nanyado from University of Manchester, UK, who will talk on NLP for healthcare. Thank you all for joining. We'll see you tomorrow.